same way. I'm no longer going to defend the New Testament texts in the same way. It's a waste of energy when you realize they're not talking about hell. They're talking about ceremonial uncleanliness. And nobody is ceremonial unclean. Good, great, I don't have to worry about it anymore. All things are clean, but not healthy. You see, suddenly you're freed up from all those problem texts of the New Testament. We were never given permission to eat the stuff in the first place.
Yeah.
And some things are more unhealthy. All you have to do is tour around the West Coast or the East Coast and look at the prohibitions on shellfish collection. Because they're toxic.
Yeah.
Because they're the first ones that get poisoned because of what they eat. Well, you do end up in some interesting situations. I remember some years ago, I was in Brazil. My brothers wanted to take me out to lunch. So they took me out to this beautiful, it was very exotic. They had quail eggs and all kinds of fancy foods, and there was these big, long, white things with red ends on them, and these guys were loading up their plates, all these good Adventist brothers. And I said, what are those things you guys are? I've never seen anything like, they're some kind of vegetable. Must have liked them because they were all taking a lot of them, you know. So I thought, well, maybe I better try one of these things before I take too many of them in case I don't like it. So I took one bite and I said, this is crab. If you've ever eaten crab, that's the nastiest flavor. At least that's my opinion.
So they've been eating crab.
You guys are trying to pervert my nice, pure record. Okay, let's move on then.
The eating crabs.
We had left off with a discussion about if someone in our church nailed it down specifically to say, is it a sin to eat pork?
Okay.
How would we?
Well, my answer would be something like this. People come up to me all the time and say, is this a sin? And I say, that's really not the right question. That's really not a good Christian question. The Christian never says, how close can I come to the edge of the cliff without falling over? The Christian always says, what can I do most to glorify God? So this is my answer. This is the answer I would have given. I've given it many times. Is this a sin? That's not a Christian question. The Christian question is, what can I do most in my body and in my life and in my entertainment to glorify God? But eat or drink, do all to the glory of God. I want to maximize, not minimize. I'm not trying to get as close as possible to evil or what might not be good for me.
So that question itself is just a behavior-based thinking approach.
It's not best for me.
Yeah, reshaping the question.
Now,
but a lot of people think it is a sin.
yeah? And where does it, you see, this is the problem. What is sin? The Pharisees wanted to get to the littlest. There was a guy in Illinois, I know what church he belonged to, and he believed there's only two people in the world that were perfect. One was Bob Wieland of 1888 fame. He was the other one. He was about 6'3", but he weighed 130 pounds. He was skinny. And why was he skinny? Because he discovered that it was wrong to eat almost everything, including wheat, rice, barley, oats, all grains. So he wouldn't eat any. Those were all sinful things to eat. And so, by the time he got finished, he didn't have much he could eat. So he was very skinny. But every other Wednesday afternoon, he fell. And he ate 2 puffed, this is a true story, 2 puffed rice patties. Now, I'd say that's pretty close to perfection, wouldn't you? I mean, every 14th day he ate 2 puffed rice patties, practically nothing if you squish it down, you see. Yeah. But you see, the perfectionist who's working on itemized sin is looking at the smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. Jesus is heading the opposite direction. He says, love your enemy. Oh, that's everybody. Love your neighbor, that's everybody, including enemy. I mean, wow. Jesus has made it big, these people are making it small. And where is it that, if you were looking at the itemized small, how small of a piece of sin can you have without it being sinful? How small of a piece of pollution can you have without being polluted? Since all pollution is sin. And so they're working smaller, 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 smaller. And of course, one of the great, I think we used this in the class, the other class, one of the great drawings that deals with this sort of thing is the one here. Sanctification is the work of a lifetime. When you first meet Jesus, Jesus does it all, but as you go along, you get better and better and better and better until you get up here and you don't need the Jesus at all.
That's
I was taught that in college.
That's Fernando Tao.
Yeah.
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 I got his book.
Yeah. No. You see, Jesus is working on the big things. Love your neighbor, and neighbor includes enemy. Now, I was holding meetings over the Gulf State Conference, and some guy comes up to me after I made my lecture, and he says, okay, you're talking about the love and all this stuff. He says, when are we going to get down to the real stuff? The strong meat. I said, okay, what do you think the strong meat is? Well, he was on to the little bitty stuff. I said, look, any idiot can get the victory over cheese. You can do that without Jesus, for crying out loud. That's not difficult. Anybody can do it. But to truly love your enemy, that takes grace. I said, you got the whole thing mixed up on what the real stuff is. These people will never die off. Because it's the human mind. And you see, when a perfectionist talks about sin, what are they talking about? They're talking about sins of commission. The things you do wrong. They overlook sins of omission. And that's what the judgment on. You didn't feed your neighbor, you didn't care, you didn't love. They've got to define sin as something very small, and if you do that, then you can overcome. None of us can overcome on what really makes us Christians. Jesus has to do it for us, with using us, of course, with our surrendered wills. See, the human mind wants to do it on their own. There's got to be something that I contribute to this, isn't there? You know?
That's right.
I just can't. The trouble with grace is it's cheap love, cheap grace, cheap grace. Well, there's no such thing as cheap grace. Jesus died, but he wants to transform you, and he wants to make you into a totally different person, not just one who's got a few different habits. Anyway, so this is the problem. How small of a particle of sin is it before it's no longer sin? That's a real problem. Is it this big, or that big, or this big? Or if you put it under a microscope and you still see a little spot down there under the microscope, is that still sin? You know, God is not interested in that question. I always say, hey, I I just refuse to answer the question. I mean, I don't answer. I just say it's not a Christian question. Is this a sin? Is it a sin to go see this movie? What's the movie about? 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31, to my way of thinking, is one of the key texts in lifestyle. Whether you eat or drink or whatsoever you do. That includes use of time, includes your relationship with your wife, includes what you watch on TV, includes how you exercise or don't exercise. It includes the whole realm. Okay, military service. Now, Keith did ask if we could have a question and answer period that's just kind of general, and we probably will have time for that tomorrow morning. If not, we'll just take a little time in the afternoon, or before we break for lunch. I really don't want to see you guys tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk tomorrow about where we are. The exam is scheduled from 7 to 9, and I haven't heard any complaints on that, so I assume we're all right. It's nice to have adequate time and to prepare and to become rested to the exam. Because some people are always trying to get me to say, can't we have it at 3? Well, no, we can't have it at 3. We could have it at 6, but I won't move any closer than 6. So if you guys have a big complaint, we'll discuss that. But I do want you to have adequate time to process the material tomorrow. But we will have, if you don't want to process it, that's your business, Do whatever else you want to do. I don't care.
Unprocessed, raw is always better in foods.
Okay, military service. I don't want, as it is, I'm probably going to drag this out till tomorrow morning anyway. But tomorrow morning's lectures are not long lectures.